This week, we'd like to encourage you to check out Brave. Brave is a great new web browser that blocks ads, trackers, and malware, but it's also an entirely new way for you to help support websites and creators that you like. On a monthly basis, you're able to fund a wallet with the crypto token called Basic Attention Token, BAT, and allocate a percentage of that to your favorite creators. In the near future, the browser will enable you as a user to earn BAT tokens by watching creator-approved ads. We'll also be offering exclusive content on KONGOS.com to Brave users as that functionality becomes available. Right now, they're running a promotion where we get a donation for every listener we refer that downloads the browser. So head to brave.com/KON252 and download the browser now. That's brave.com/KON252. As always, don't forget to tell your friends about the Front Lounge with Kongos, and check out kongos.com/podcast to follow along with today's episode, and we'll make sure to have links to the Brave browser on there also.
Hello and welcome back to the Front Lounge with Kongos. We are here with Ross Kenyon. Ross is a friend of mine for I don't know how many years now.
I don't know. I think high school we had a mutual friend introduce us.
Yeah, something like that. But now you are working at a company called Nori, and you are the lead growth strategist. Is that the official title?
It is, but I prefer cross-functional wild card. I feel like I get tapped in whenever they need someone with weird skills. I'm a generalist and always have been. So I do a lot of communications work and business development and strategy.
Maybe we should let the audience know what Nori is. It's a blockchain technology company, and maybe you explain this because I'm going to fuck it up.
Blockchain, yeah. We're the world's first carbon removal marketplace. So the conventional carbon markets are typically not very good. Oftentimes they count carbon that's been sequestered twice and just don't work super well. So blockchain is just kind of fancy accounting. It has a lot of principles that are similar to that, and it makes it really easy to do this for the first time. So I can go into detail if you want here, but
well, let's I'm already a little bit lost.
Oh yeah,
I can imagine some of our audience
just go carbon markets at you right first off.
So carbon markets, is that like people who want to offset their carbon footprint, companies, or they want to buy credits, so that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about? Or
that's right, but Nori just does removal. So even if we cut emissions immediately to nothing, well, first that would make the world extremely poor overnight. We have to have that, but it isn't. We're already past the point where we have to pull some out to even get back to like the safety zone, which is closer to the pre-industrial levels. So we're working with people who are like actually pulling it out, and we're trying to do this approach too because this technology is catching up where this is possible for the first time, and it's a nascent thing that's happening, carbon removal. But it's really important to us that you can keep economic development and have the environment be protected, whereas conventional models of like reducing emissions only is sort of like you sort of lose the industrial progress kind of mentality.
Yeah.
So I mean, what governments around the world, they have cap and trade programs, or they have penalties for producing carbon, and one of the things you do if you go over your limit as a company is you have to then offset it by selling your carbon tokens, right? In some sort of obscure market where you don't know who the buyer is, and it's very difficult to establish a price. So what Nori is trying to do is create a marketplace for carbon removal so that you can establish a price. Is that accurate?
Dude, this guy did his homework. look at this over here.
Yeah, if we Danny, close your laptop and say that again.
Yeah, well, it's weird because we've been friends for a long time, but I got interested in blockchain stuff just ideologically because Bitcoin was fascinating when it happened, and so I figured you were parallel interested in it, and then when I talked to you I realized, oh shit, he's actually interested in it. You've worked with all these different blockchain companies.
Well, I think for the purpose of this podcast we should probably slowly introduce the audience, because most, the last 14 episodes or 15 episodes or whatever, our audience has been used to the conversations about music and tour life and all these things that they can easily latch onto, and we will talk a little bit more about that, and because Ross has done a lot of traveling, so it's not only going to be about blockchain and cryptocurrencies and carbon emissions, but maybe just to like imagine we're 5 years old and you're trying to explain, like there's a Reddit subreddit for this, explain to me like I'm 5.
That's great one.
Yeah. Explain
Why
to
don't we
us.
start with Bitcoin, because you can go on the internet and you can go find a million YouTube explanations, but maybe you're listening to this right now in your car or something, and we'll just give you the quick breakdown of the problem Bitcoin solved, which is the double spend problem, which made it special, right?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. Well, if you think about blockchain in general, one of the main things you can think about it is as a distributed ledger. So the big like sexy word that people love in tech circles for this is disintermediation, which is
I like that word.
Yeah,
I'm going to try to use it on my wife later on.
Very, very aroused right now.
Already too much, but basically just means getting rid of the middleman. Then that's a big part of this, but also with the distributed ledger technology, that if you think about a ledger and you have a centralized keeper of records, think about like PayPal or credit card companies. You're trusting one single entity to store all of the data of who owns what and who has money coming to them and who paid who. But with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies in general, the people who do the mining and validating these transactions to make sure that they're valid, they all hold copies of this information. So it's transparent across the entire system, and you don't need to rely on one single source, because obviously you see like Equifax or you have hacks that centralized entities are very vulnerable to that. But this is one of the things that cryptocurrencies are much less so.
Right.
So
I mean,
maybe a connection point for people would be almost like torrents. It's
that's the idea. I mean, the name came from that.
Yeah, that everything is stored everywhere in a sense across everyone on the network, or everyone has the ability to at least confirm that something is real or not in terms of a transaction.
See, if you watch Silicon Valley, which I know a lot of people watch Silicon Valley, and a lot of people don't really relate to all the technical jargon. They've done a really good job of making these sort of relatively esoteric ideas palatable to your general audience, because no matter whether you like it or not, within a few years, we're all going to be on a first name basis with these technologies, and we're going to be having to use them, just like internet. Everyone had to learn what internet, what email was, what Facebook was, and depending on what generation you're in, you get on that ship a little later than everybody else, but this is coming, so it's kind of worth diving. We enjoy diving into it, and seeing how it might relate to us. But the idea that information is not going to be stored centrally, money is not going to be accounted for centrally. It's gonna be transparent, it's gonna be public, but at the same time anonymous. That's a key factor in this thing as well, right?
Well, they say pseudonymous. So
pseudonymous?
Yeah, it's like kind of anonymous. So for Bitcoin and Ethereum, you can pretty much figure out who is who if you have enough other information based on like what accounts they're linked to. But then there are certain blockchain projects and cryptocurrencies that are entirely anonymous and specialize in it, where you couldn't figure it out once you.
Monero, I know, is I think the only mathematically anonymous.
Yeah, Monero. I've done some work with Zencash, and they're a privacy token as well. Dash is very big.
Yeah,
there's a misconception out there that when everyone's talking about cryptocurrencies, the main thought is Bitcoin. No one talks about the other 1,300 or 1,400 other tokens and coins that exist, because Bitcoin is the dominant one in the market and in the news and everything. And a lot of people don't realize also that at least the Bitcoin blockchain has not been hacked, right, in 8 years or 9 years since it's been around.
As far as I know, no. I mean, you have things like centralized services have been hacked, like Mt. Gox
exchanges
or stuff like that. Yeah, exchanges get targeted because
T-Mobile.
that's very easy. Yeah.
So a Bitcoin itself, it may yet fail. Obviously, nobody's going to make predictions about that, or flaws may be revealed in it. But it is pretty remarkable. What is the market cap of it right now? It's like
of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'd have to look it up.
100 billion.
Yeah, the 100-something billion, I think.
The incentive to hack it basically is enormous. It's one of the amount of potential wealth you could gain by hacking the Bitcoin network is so huge that's what makes its lack of vulnerability even more remarkable, I think.
But
so let's connect it back to the environmental causes that you're working on with this new technology. And one thing you said I thought was interesting, and I heard it recently on another podcast, that this idea, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Tom's of Maine or one of these companies, you know, that does like natural products. And this guy was really interested in environmental issues and ideas and making a better product, something that was safer, that had less chemicals, yada, yada, yada. But he didn't want to compromise the business incentive of it. He thought you should be able to have something that's safe and environmentally positive and not have to pay more for it or have some other penalty. So that's what you're talking about, right? Dealing with the emissions problem that the world has, and also making the business aspect of it where it's not a disincentive, where companies don't feel like they're being punished to be environmentally, I guess,
not
positive.
overly punished, maybe, because you're making the market efficient, or.
Yeah, well, a big part of what we're doing is when people do find a way to remove carbon from the atmosphere, they pull carbon dioxide out. There are various ways that you can store it productively. Like one of the big ones is regenerative agriculture, which is a big term that's hip in those circles. But basically, if you don't till your land and you use cover crops and you use complex crop rotation, basically the soil will start sucking carbon out of the atmosphere by the plants that grow in it. And so like you have soil carbon that becomes quite potent. And it takes a couple of years for farmers to get over the hump where it's actually worth doing, but it's actually quite profitable once they can get over that hump. But Nori pays them, so we're helping to like kind of subsidize this transition a little bit because they are doing a service that is not currently monetized, which is carbon removal. So we're trying to like make this thing come into existence.
Okay. So
I mean, I think that's something to cover. Maybe is that like the innumerable ways that people are figuring out to remove carbon. There's concrete, right, that absorbs carbon. Yeah. I mean, there's literal huge machines that they just run where it sucks carbon out of the air.
Direct air capture.
Yeah.
Dude, you did your homework.
Yeah. Well, I remember hearing some of these ideas, and it was Nori that I never realized, you know, how the selling of carbon removal worked at all, and the huge gap in that market or the huge inefficiency that you guys are trying to solve, I think is like such a clear
does
idea.
Nori stand for something, or is it just the name?
Man, we went through this. You guys had it easy for naming your group. But
we just couldn't come up with a better one, so we just took our own name.
Yeah, if you ever had to come up with a name for a business and you're just sitting around, you're like, I don't know, what's something? And then we had like a board where people put down names and stuff. We wanted something that we like seaweed. We think that actually this next century is going to be huge. People harvesting it is. It grows. Some of them grow like feet per day, and they suck a ton of carbon dioxide out of the ocean. Which ocean acidification from carbon is actually like pretty scary. Also, Nori's just a cute name, and we all kind of liked it.
What's funny is I know what Nori is, and I didn't make that connection until now. But it makes total sense. It's a great name for.
So just explain.
So is that a type of edible seaweed?
Yeah, it's like you get at a sushi restaurant. It's the wrapper that on like
I just didn't realize that was what it's called. All right.
So just explain to me what you were saying before is about the farmers. So if they don't do crop rotation, they're depleting basically the soil nutrients. How are you're incentivizing them by actually paying them to plant cover crops and things that directly pull carbon out of the atmosphere?
That's right. Every 1 ton of carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere, we will give 1 ton or 1 token of Nori ton, which is the name of the token, at least for now, to them. But that token will be freely floating in secondary markets, like exchanges that you will typically see, which is super important because you need the liquidity. You need people buying and selling it to make sure that the prices reflect information. That's the whole point of a price system. But there also isn't a universal price on carbon removal. In the conventional markets, oftentimes the prices are pegged in certain kinds of ways that don't really allow the flexibility that's necessary that markets provide. So it's the first time that there's ever been a price on carbon removal, and that's a big part of what we're creating.
Right. And that price is being determined, or you're hoping that price will be determined by a marketplace. And
that's right. And then you get into this like hard questions of token economics and monetary policy, where it's like, and game theory, where how do you design a system where people acting self-interestedly will it lead to pro-social results, where like you get people to do a good thing because it makes sense to them, whereas relying on altruism typically is like, I think it might work for a little bit, but I think people get selfish again real quick.
There has to be an incentive beyond altruism for these types of things to occur, because you start with a lofty goal of like trying to save the planet, but it relies in a certain extent on speculation and greed. So it's just interesting to see that greed and speculation, how it can now be manipulated in a way or used to serve any kind of end. And
I mean,
it's the stock market, I guess, but on just such a quicker scale.
I think the tech bubble is a good analogy, because the tech bubble is thought of that, just that terminology is a negative image of it. But the tech bubble was really a great thing, unless you lost all your money. You know, there was huge speculation on massively new technologies, and the real ones survived.
The ones that provided real value.
So this idea that it was purely a bubble is nonsense. It was a new technology changing the world. You know, internet companies and internet-based companies, and a bubble was inevitable because something real was created, and of course there's going to be speculation upon that. So that's what Nori was interesting to me, because you go down these lists of coins, and I'm desperately trying to figure out the point of them. You know what I mean?
I can't even keep up. People tell me like, "Have you heard of this coin?"
Right,
I'm like, "No."
Yeah, and so the idea of carbon removal, there's a huge financial market for it, and it obviously has environmental ambitions, whether it's the governments implementing their cap and trade policies and so on, or just people who are interested in that. So I'm assuming that other people at the company are environmentalists, or how do they get involved with the company?
Pretty much all of them are, but they're dissatisfied with the conventional approach that tries to, like that original dichotomy that I gave between like economic growth and the environment. All don't really see like a necessary reason for conflict there, and a lot of environmentalists, I think, tend to think humans are bad, or like I've read some quotes from them in some of their books where humans are described as parasitical, or you're like this is not the appropriate way to view humanity. Like, surely there's a way to do both. And so
right, that's that kind of primitivism. Is that what you're referencing? Maybe like what's his name, Abbey?
Oh, Edward Abbey?
Yeah. I've never read his stuff, so I can't comment. Apparently
he's super fun. Desert Solitaire is quite good. But yeah, I don't really see a reason for this conflict, but it's pretty common. It's often kind of mainstream, and it's worrying. But I think if we could set the incentives right, which is the whole point of crypto economics, and making sure that you build a system that gets the right incentives to lead to pro-social results through people's selfish desires. If you could do that, then I think a lot of the conflict between like the right is skeptical of climate change because if you're being uncharitable because it hurts their bottom line, or maybe they think it's too late to do anything and we shouldn't bother. And then the left sometimes this sounds a little bad, but I think sometimes they want this because it leads to policies that they want, or sometimes I'm only debating saying this because I don't want to have to ask you guys to cut it out later, but I can tell a little story about this.
No, I
can check with my guys.
I think what it is that people with strong political leanings, one way or the other, they'll use any issue to make their point. You know what I mean? And the sort of true benefit is never really considered. It's like, how can we get our party to win? You know, how can we win this argument? When in actual fact, if you actually care about the environment, both sides would be trying to find a system that creates the end result and at the same time is a realistic proposal in terms of business, because business people are going to do what the fuck they want. They can control government. They have this ability to get their end. So now if you could somehow incentivize them and basically create that system where their greed actually has a positive effect on the environment, you know, that's like the golden. That's the
dream
something.
ticket
Yeah,
right
something
there.
to truly aim for.
I got to tell this story then because you set it up so well. But I don't know all the details of this story, so I'll try to make sure I get it at least partially right. But Washington State had a carbon tax proposal that was revenue neutral. So they were cutting other taxes that businesses liked less than this one, and they weren't raising any additional funds. But and the right had already signed on to it in Washington State, but the left opposed it because the left wanted a bunch of jobs programs attached to it and a bunch of other political goals of theirs. But if you think climate change is this like imminent disaster, as the left typically tends to do, like wouldn't that be like the prime directive, you know, the overriding concern? But instead they try to like attach all this other stuff to it and then sunk it and voted against it because they didn't get like everything that they wanted out of it.
Yeah.
It was.
But what's the
they betrayed themselves. It sounds like they betrayed their supposed advocacy.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
what was the word you used at the beginning to describe removing the middleman?
Disintermediation.
Right. That, I mean, we'll get into this in our music business section, but the ability to remove, in that situation that you're talking about, it's always the middleman that fucks things up. And I know that's like a gross overstatement, but that's a bit how we're feeling in general, you know, in the music business. But you can't, if you democratize, in a sense, the idea of saving the world or, you know, reducing carbon emissions or removing them, then you're not relying on the filtering down and the gatekeeping aspect of what the people actually want. Because if you somehow were able to have cryptography involved in the voting on those bills, it would probably have been an entirely different result that wasn't thinking about, well, how do we play this vote against this vote and this future thing that I'm looking for from this person. You know, it just gets so mixed up with middlemen.
Yeah, but you can already see how that's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away, but
there's a great article on aeon.co. I don't know if you go to that site about the need for trust. But, you know, the initial goal of blockchains was, they call them trustless systems, you know, because you don't need to rely on people to verify Bitcoin transactions or whatever. It's a system that inherently validates transactions or sending of information. But the article's point, the whole point of this guy's take on it was that trying to eliminate trust is never going to work. It's actually, we need to increase trust as an idea, and trust is a good thing, and the need for trust. Like when you're in the emotional state of needing to trust a person, well, that in itself is a kind of selflessness. You know, you're placing in their hands a certain amount of your well-being. So trust is a great thing, and systems that are attempting to remove it, they're invariably going to fail because humanity as a whole depends on the idea of trust.
We've talked about that article, you and I, before, and I agree with the general concept of it. But if you're talking about within one little framework, like certain things can run in a trustless way. Mm-hmm. Like you don't need the trust. It obviously is a kind of a human concept.
Well, I can't envision a world where trust is not necessary.
Not a world, but I can envisage the fact that, like, I hit record on this podcast and it observes the laws that it lives within in the software architecture.
But Bitcoin's a perfect example, because that's where I found the Bitcoin thing so, you know, intriguing, because anybody who was into like monetary policy or what effect that has on the world was, when they heard the idea for Bitcoin, they're like, wow, a decentralized currency that grows at a stable rate, that can't be manipulated, and that can't be used to fund wars, and so on and so on and so on. Well, this is very ideologically appealing. And immediately upon its success, thousands of competitors came into being. So the trustlessness of his system didn't seem to change a single thing.
You're talking about the trustlessness between systems, because obviously there are people manipulating any of the cryptocurrency markets because they come in with $1 billion US dollars and say, I'm going to buy whatever it is, 100 million Ethereum, and that manipulates the market from the outside. But the inherent structure and the rules of the Ethereum universe or the Bitcoin universe have not yet been manipulated in terms of being actually hacked, actually interfered with, changing the fundamental nature of how the system works. From the outside, you can inflate or deflate based on relative value to things in the real world.
I completely lost how we got into this. I
can throw something in here that could maybe bring us back. It's like, I don't really love the term trustless, because that's the one that always gets thrown around that you guys mentioned. But whenever someone says Bitcoin isn't backed by anything, the thing that it's backed by is trust, essentially. that the thing will work. Like that's the only thing that gives it value, is that it's going to go where you say it's going to go, assuming you did everything right on your end. And that's the way it's going to be. You don't have to like rely on anyone else for that. Right. And that's all that backs it is money that you can trust. But besides that, like
money that you
which
have
is the
to
same
trust.
thing with every other type of currency or anything else in the world.
That's, that's a bingo, as they say.
Well, yeah, without getting, if there are any actual, because, once we attract some actual cryptocurrency nerds out there listening to this, we won't directly address it and get into the details, but even now Bitcoin is having problems with the fact that miners are becoming so powerful and centralized, and they are able to manipulate it within this, within the system. But again, you're saying ideologically it doesn't.
So obscure and probably very like I don't even know how we get out of this quagmire.
Just a closing thought is that what Dylan's saying now, that if you've got miners beginning to become so powerful that they are actually affecting the internal infrastructure of Bitcoin, there are new cryptocurrencies that are trying to address that by not relying on the same methodology of dealing with solving the or checking the transactions.
I think
so the idea is that ideologically you're moving towards something that perhaps exists as a utopian microcosm of transactions in that world, right?
Right, and I think just basically to bring it back to the environmental thing, I think the idea of trust and trustless, for the general public, none of these terms are going to mean anything, especially in the cryptographic sense. But what your company is doing is it's almost playing on the just the financial needs and wants of any company out there, that it's just an incentivization to help along the world, because you're not always going to be altruistic or ever going to be altruistic. But if there's some incentive in donating to charity or removing carbon or helping in one way or another, then especially financial, then that's what actually moves the world. I feel like that's what is moving along these projects. It's going to move the blockchain technology along at a really fast rate. It's not, altruism isn't going to do it. It's going to be financial incentives, which is what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and on the buyer side too, I don't know if you've ever flown and you've seen that, like airlines will try to sell you carbon offset credits. I would never buy one of those because I have no idea, like, is this actually working? Is this actually doing something? And so nowadays with I don't know if you guys know what IoT is, Internet of Things, but smart wireless sensors that are coming, that sort of thing. And plus blockchain, if you could like actually know that what you're buying was making a tangible, measurable effect, then I'd be much more likely to do it.
Well,
so that's one thing I found interesting.
That's a huge use of blockchain, is like donating to charities. Every time a disaster happens in the world, you're prompted to donate money to the Red Cross or to this or that, and you actually have no idea how that money is being spent, where it's being used, and I don't know exactly or even on the slightest level, how on the technical level the blockchain would help that, but I know it would. That you would be able to, or that the blockchain and this public ledger would be able to track where this money is being spent. So like every time I see one of those advertisements and your emotional state is changed by seeing these tragedies around the world, you feel like you should do something about it, you should give to it, but then you're like, well, I'm just going to be giving this fucking money to people that are taking 90% of it and putting it into salaries and not doing anything else with the money to help anyone. And this is a situation where blockchain would really, really improve that.
Well, I mean, there's the use case, I think, it's a bit like saying, what is the use of the internet? Everything. Whatever you can think of, there's an area that blockchain is going to touch in the future.
Oh man, we sort of push back on that sometimes because we'll look at new projects and be like, does this need to be a blockchain thing?
No, there's a bunch of nonsense, like there's a bunch of bullshit websites. But is there an industry currently that is not touched by the internet? You know what I mean?
Probably not.
Yeah. So that's a.
Okay,
before we get to just the Internet of Things thing, is with regard to carbon removal. One of the examples I think I saw you guys give was that there are currently sensors measuring carbon levels in soil, right?
There are.
And so the idea is any farm who's wanting to participate in carbon removal would pepper their farm with soil testers, which would connect to the internet and send carbon data back to a blockchain. And then you would instantly be able to measure how much carbon they're removing, as opposed to perhaps their previous monoculture or whatever. And that would they would then accurately be paid in carbon credits, I'm assuming, by whatever program is incentivizing them.
That's right, but we have a third-party series of verifiers too, because obviously there's a huge incentive to cheat, right?
Yes,
like
right,
why
yeah.
wouldn't you? So we're trying to find the right game theory to make sure that the people who are verifying this are not in collusion with the people who are receiving the
Right, yeah.
tokens.
It sounds like an enormous undertaking.
That's the hardest part in all of these markets is the verification, because people do cheat, and it's how do you catch them and how do you design it so that it's minimized.
Assuming you've got a fluid market that's working, wouldn't it instantly reveal what is the most efficient way to remove carbon? Like maybe the concrete idea is useless compared to some other form.
Yeah,
or
it might
whatever.
be 3 times as expensive as something
Yeah.
else, but since there's only one price at any given time for carbon removal, you want people who are doing different ways of doing it to compete ruthlessly against each other to keep their costs down so their profit margins go up for their service.
Right.
So I'm going to do a non sequitur. We're talking, well, I guess it's not total non sequitur. There's earth involved and dirt. There's this guy, I think he's Australian, has these videos on the internet, on the YouTube, where he films himself building primitive technology. I think that's the name of the
I
series.
think I've seen this.
Yeah, we'll put a link up to it on the site. And he basically builds everything you can imagine, like pots. He'll build an oven out of clay, and then he'll build a fire in the oven to, finish off the pots that he built. And basically, all the stuff you would need to do if all of this cryptocurrency and the economy in the world just collapses and we don't fix the carbon solution and we're left stranded on an island somewhere. So I think that would be a good thing, is for everyone to go research cryptocurrency a bit and the environment, and then go watch this guy's videos and see how we get out of this.
Well, the irony is this guy, Primitive Technology, it's super fascinating, is it's all on the internet. He's describing how to basically survive the apocalypse, or if you're stranded on an island like Tom Hanks, like what you would do in that situation. He has 7.2 million subscribers on YouTube. and you know that all these people are just sitting in their fucking chairs eating Doritos and going like, oh yeah, I could do that. When I end up on the island, I'm going to be able to do that.
If it ever gets to the point where you need to be able to do that, you're not going to be able to like open up your iPhone and like follow his instructions. You need to save.
Right, you need to memorize
we had an SAS handbook. SAS was like the
Special air service.
Yeah,
right?
in the UK we had that SAS handbook. That's one of the earliest books I remember, because it told you how to make a bow and arrow, and the instructions were fine. I just failed at making these bows and arrows. But yeah, maybe we should be downloading Primitive Technologies videos
and storing them on beta.
storing them in a picture book so we can read them after the apocalypse.
Danny, what's a quick update from your Uber story from last week? Remember?
Oh, did I talk about that last time?
You told us what happened, that they were trying to get you for throwing up
through relentless complaining, and which I learned from my mother, the tone to take with corporations. I got my money back.
All of it.
So Uber, thanks for my money. Yeah. I called an Uber and somebody got into it, the Uber, and then threw up in it. Like somebody took my Uber mistakenly.
It wasn't Pool, it was yours.
No, it was a single Uber, and somebody, like the driver picked up the wrong guy. It sounds like bullshit. It sounds like I just threw up and wanted to get out of it, but really some guy just threw up in the car.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
Yeah, and so I got charged a cleaning fee, and it was like negotiating a peace treaty, trying to get my money back.
Well, do you have the last email you sent, which I thought was quite funny? Just trying to explain to them about the.
Yeah, it was funny. Danny brings up.
That's what. This is what got me my money back. Yeah, I need to find this. They gave me my money back, and then they charged me for the trip. So I said, hey Keith, thanks. Please refund the remainder of that trip, as I didn't take it. It's not that there was no incident during my trip. It's that there was no trip. Kind of like the Matrix, there was no spoon except for me. There really was no trip. I was totally admiring their willingness to hold on to money. They denied giving me any of the money back, like for 3 times, and then they refunded the cleaning fee and still charged me for the trip, which I wasn't on.
This is why they're good at business.
Yeah, exactly.
We're bad at this kind of thing, because after like 2 steps, you're like, okay.
No, I've complained to Uber Uber before, and they're like, they respond super quickly, but they like say no a lot. Whereas if you complain to an airplane, you're like, oh, my thing wasn't exactly perfect. They're like, here's $200. Like, don't even worry about
Which
it.
airline is this?
What fucking airline are you talking about?
I'll coach you guys on how to write these emails sometime.
The points guy. I think you turned me on to the points guy.
Oh yeah, that's a great website. But yeah, I did the credit card miles game.
The weirdest thing about that guy's website is he's always like, I'm friends with these stewardesses. Like, what are you talking about, dude? You fly around and make friends with these stewardesses? It doesn't sound real. It doesn't sound believable.
What's funny, this points discussion and miles, we released the trailers for this upcoming docu-series we're working on called Bus Call, and there's a good like 3 to 4 hours worth nonstop of us just talking about what miles we're going to get. So it's definitely going to be included in the series, just us sitting around like this going, oh, if I fly to LA on American Airlines and I get the economy seat, that gets me 340 miles. It's boring as hell, but
have you ever done a status run?
Yeah, I've definitely, and I'll go out of my way to fly airlines that I like just for those points, even though you're like, this is not worth the value that I'm getting out of these points. But did you guys make it to executive platinum?
Last year,
that's the dream, right?
Last year we did. We had 5 people on our crew, 6 people. No, 5 people on our crew that were exec plat. And then exec plat, you know. So
you just abbreviate it, you say it so much that you're bored of it. Yeah.
And now the only one is
we lost our.
We're back down to platinum.
Yeah, we lost
now.
our status. We're back down to platinum, but our monitoring engineer, Garen, he got executive platinum. So now we're going to be using him.
He's going to get a lot of scowls as we walk by him in first class because he's going to get upgraded more than us.
So why did you? What were you traveling for? Like what was the need for all the points and traveling and everything?
I was just writing mostly. So before I got into, I always say like I went pro in the blockchain space about a year ago. Before that, I was doing video work. I was writing and producing a lot out here in LA. And oftentimes I would just be free enough where I could travel. It was client work where you had to be on email and make sure you were managing your teams correctly and could be anywhere. So didn't have a lot of money or anything. So I just oftentimes would be real clever with credit cards, if I do say so myself, and schlep around. But those days are over. I'm married now, and those
broke.
Yeah, it was a long series of those trips. Whereas I was working on a satire of travel and travelers before I got into this, but the whole vibe of it kind of changed when Trump got elected. I was sort of making fun of people at hostels who say things like, "Well, why do we even need money?" Or like, "What if we all just?" Whenever I hear someone say, "What if we all just?" I'm just like, "This is going to be stupid, guaranteed." And like some of those conversations in hostels just like really ate away at my soul for a while. And so I started writing this piece. But then when Trump got elected, it was sort of like, I don't know if the left wants to laugh at itself as much anymore, or maybe whatever. But also like so many times traveling, I would just be miserable where I'm really sweaty. People keep trying to like get my money from me by pretending to be my friend and then asking me something about it. And it was just, I found it really, really kind of tiring at some point. So
were you out of the country when he was elected?
Yeah, I was here.
Oh, you were here.
Yeah.
We were in England. We were in England when he got elected, and it was surreal. I mean, literally everyone outside of America, that's all I wanted to talk about with us. Like, what's up with Trump? What's the deal with this? You know?
Yeah, I felt like we had an interesting perspective on it because of that. Because they were viewing us as curiosities, like people from the land where Donald Trump just got elected. You know, and they didn't have nearly the negativity that the American left has here, because the British they're left of America. That's like, you know, they're generally on that, and they're progressive or whatever. But they didn't view it nearly as negatively. It was more like a curiosity to them, in the same way, I guess, that we would view events in other countries as curiosities. You know,
it really was just like a state of shock. Even like the local crew, when no matter who it was, like our crew came up to set up for a sound check. We came in then to sound check, and everyone was just like, So Trump, huh? I was like, Yeah. What can we say?
If Simon Cowell got elected prime minister or something, you know, I mean, I know it's not a parallel, but that would be a conversation, you know. Is he allowed to wear
Piers Morgan? Maybe
is he allowed to wear that deep of a V-neck in 10 Downing Street? You know.
Yeah, Piers Morgan would be almost the equivalent.
No, because Simon Cowell's similar to Trump. They're both like, he's aggressive and successful. Piers Morgan is just a weaselly little like weasel. There's no better word. Weasel.
He is an unusual one. He wants to be somebody's friend. It feels like all the time. You know what I mean? He's like desperate to be somebody's friend. Anyway, before we get too
let's talk about music for a little bit.
Piss off.
We are going to talk about Chris Potter, who is a jazz saxophonist, and we'll put a couple links specifically to this track called Rumples that he wrote. And there's a recording with him and what's his name? Adam Rogers, Craig
Nate
Taborn,
Smith.
and Nate Smith. And it's one of these really, really difficult heads or melodies to play that you watch videos of it or just even listening to it, it really just puts you back in your place of like where you need to get back to in terms of practicing, because it's a completely odd meter, very weird melody, very weird timing, and just I've lost my train of thought. I'm trying to think about it.
It's sort of a pyrotechnical demonstration of what's musically possible for human beings. You know, you put 4 human beings together. You say, well, what is the? It's almost like gymnastics. You know, what's the most difficult thing? But I'm not saying it's devoid of emotional content, but it is almost like an exercise. It's so complicated and so energetic and fiery.
Is it like hard bop or like Zappa or Joanna Newsom, or just like you're just like, this is weird and hard.
It's
like
new.
All those things.
Yeah, okay.
It sounds new. I mean, it's nothing particularly new, but they're all using ordinary instruments, you know, like acoustic drums and all that. But the approach to the melody sounds new to me. It doesn't sound like something you've really heard before.
He just won an Oscar. He won a Grammy, I think. Chris
Potter did?
I think he did I know he was nominated, but I think he might have won for best.
Yeah, he was a bit of a child prodigy. There's videos you can find of him. Like he was 11 years old and he was playing the Charlie Parker, like the Omnibook, whatever it's called. And now he's probably, I think, my favorite modern jazz saxophone player, and he's one of the few saxophone players that plays in time when he's playing by himself, like as in like really tight timing, because saxophone players, it's such a soft attack on the front of a saxophone note, you can kind of like you can fart your way around the beat, and he plays and you're like, oh, he could be a drummer, because I can feel the groove inherent in his playing. So we'll put some videos up to him.
There's a
incredible guy.
There's a bunch of young guys here in LA. They play at a place called Black Rabbit Rose on Thursdays. It's hosted by Fred Durst, of all people. It's one of the, I was like, Fred Durst,
LA thing
yeah.
from
Limp
Fred
Bizkit.
Durst hosts a jazz night. Holy shit! Anyway, they actually cover Rumples, and Jacob, the saxophonist, as well. He's like, I don't know how young. I think he's 22 or something like that. But he's fucking amazing timing, you know, because they nail that head and all that. It's weird because I feel like he's Jesse was saying it. He's like Jacob's an anchor in this band. This jazz,
player.
and it's very unusual for the saxophone player to be an anchor in a band.
Yeah,
The one time I was there, what's his name? Fred Durst was on the microphone while they were soloing, and he was going like, listen to that.
It's like the sex
are you guys
tape he
hearing
did,
this?
or-
And like while the guy's soloing, he's shouting over the microphone, going, "Are you guys hearing this?"
But you know what's funny? I feel like he's necessary, because if you go to that thing, it's not like a traditional jazz environment where everyone kind of knows where to clap, they know what they're expecting. It's an LA Hollywood crowd that's just out at a club, being clubby. So it's almost like they need the coaching. And I think he's actually doing a good thing. He's trying to somehow connect people.
Yeah, he's
to this
a
music that's
genuine
effectively
fan
dead.
of jazz.
Yeah.
You know, jazz is not commercially viable for 99% of the jazz musicians out there. So he found these really young players, and he's helping them by putting on a night in Hollywood, and he's getting all, you know, like he's just getting models and stuff to go to this jazz thing. And when I first walked into the place, I just walked into the bar and heard the band. I was like, oh, these guys are fucking good. And then I didn't realize that was Fred Durst narrating the band. But anyway.
I will say this. You've never seen as good looking of a jazz crowd, because usually when you go to a jazz show, it's a bunch of like guy nerds just oh, I like what he's doing, criticizing the guy.
That guy used the wrong Phrygian scale or whatever,
What are you into these days, Ross, musically? Anything in particular?
Man, I have this thing where my tastes kind of plateau, where I find stuff I like until I'm like forced to hear something new. I got a roommate who would be like, every day would be something new, and then I sort of stagnate on my own. So I've been going back to the last Sufjan Stevens album, Carrie and Lowell. That's been on play lately, but I feel pretty stagnant. What should I be listening to?
Rumples. No,
Punch Brothers. I think Punch Brothers are. I don't know if we've talked about them before, but that's something that for me bridges the virtuoso world of music with something that's also accessible. They write really good folk songs, and some of the best musicians in the world today, I think.
Which ones?
They're a band called Punch Brothers. It's like
yeah. There's a mandolin player called Chris Thiele. He's the head of the band, and he was.
They had a song in one of the Twilight movies, or something like that, or
that was well late into
Hunger Games. Yeah. I mean, that's the only popular culture reference that people might have for them or will have heard them. They're not. I mean, they have a good career, but they're not by any means well-known.
They'll know Nickel Creek if they like bluegrass. Chris Thiele was the mandolin player from a band called Nickel Creek. It was a 3-piece, and he was also this virtuosic young kid, and Then he left that band and he wanted to do Punch Brothers, which was like kind of, limitless bluegrass or nothing traditional about it. They do some of the most obscure music, but with a traditional bluegrass lineup. So they got banjo, double bass, guitar, fiddle, and what am I missing? Mandolin.
I think I'll post the easiest introduction to them, which is them covering Reptilia. Reptilia, the Strokes song. And they do it on.
Put Kid A. I think they do Kid A, which I think is better than the original Kid A. I think.
Nori is most of them. There's like an active debate going on, but some of the main founders are way into Fish and like jam culture.
Could happen to anybody.
Yeah. It's so polarizing though. Like there's a book called You Don't Know Me, But You Don't Like Me. And then like ICP is in there and like Fish fans are in there.
I don't like Fish and jam band world, but I don't have a problem with it because I get why people like it. There's some areas where you can actually, I think, go along with what that book's saying, is where I will actually judge the person as a whole. Fish is not one of those bands where I'm like immediately discount the person.
To be perfectly honest, I just don't know the music. I don't know Grateful Dead stuff. I don't know Fish stuff. So I'm not I'll just happily jump on a bandwagon of making fun of somebody for their musical taste. I won't, but it won't be based on any actual experience.
I see. I hear the thing to look for is that, they have all their songs, right? But then the transitions between the songs always change. So they're just really creative and they're all virtuosic players.
I think the thing to look for is some acid and weed. And that's the only way you might enjoy Fish.
Well, maybe you should post that Paul F. Tompkins thing about jazz, because I know a lot, like, unless you're into jazz, you can have the very, very similar opinion about jazz. People just disappear up their buttholes.
I always hate showing people. I like old country music too, and if someone's not ready for it, like I would never show someone Townes Van Zandt or something unless like I knew they would like it, because I've heard sometimes they'll make me like it less if they hate it. I'm just like
you got to be more steadfast.
Come on,
Caleb, the guy from Kings of Leon. This is one of the few stories he told us. It was like it felt like we were around a campfire the way he told the story, but he's a huge fan of Townes Van Zandt, and he was saying Townes Van Zandt, he was kind of this ogre type guy, ogre, ugly guy, and he wrote these beautiful songs, and that guy wasn't getting beautiful girls, but he was writing these songs. They're more beautiful than anything I could imagine, and I'm getting beautiful girls, and I can't write the songs this beautiful.
He's like, and he's writing these beautiful songs about trolls.
So yeah,
it's a touching tribute.
I was in a bar recently, and they were playing all that really old school country stuff, and it's just so sad where country's gone.
Like the Nashville sound. Is like,
yeah, not even, and it's like it's the 20 years behind rock sound. Like there was that period where country sounded like butt rock from the 80s, and that, you know, they're always just behind doing a worse version of it.
Well, I mean, I think there is a slight resistance and revival, you know, the Chris Stapletons of the world.
Yeah.
But even that is very polished and very kind of, you know, well produced and well done and everything like that. The guy's an obvious, undeniable talent.
Chris, yeah, I like Chris Stapleton, but I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the
right.
average.
But you can tell that he's trying to change that whole thing, of that whole corporatization of country, at least to a degree.
It's not him. It's Sturgis.
Sturgill Simpson.
Sturgill Simpson. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah, I like his In Bloom.
Right. Yeah.
Nirvana cover. Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's
some people are bringing it back.
Totally. Yeah, I think that anytime the pendulum swings, it'll swing back. You know.
So let's talk about music business, and maybe we don't have to get too deep into this because we've done a lot of crypto talk, but the music royalty and like rights management thing is something that would have an immediate actual use for a distributed ledger, because it's a problem that every band deals with, of trying to keep track of their songs and the accounting for those songs. Like it's
like intellectual property,
and then even just down to simple accounting of like tracking streams or tracking, you know, it's being tracked, and it's a question of whether what's accounted to you relates to what was actually occurring and how many streams actually occurred.
Right. Now, for example, why don't we use ASCAP's radio collection as an example? Because BMI and they all have different methods of collection, and it's probably changed by now. This may be an outdated story, but they used to have people driving around in cars with radio detectors, and they would drive around, and their detector would listen to what the car next to them was listening to, and then gather an average on as to what stations were being listened to, and then determine the collection fees that they would send to the radio programmers or to the radio stations, and collect money based on listenership. And then also what songs were being listened to. So if Rihanna's playing in a car with one of these detectors, drives up next to you and you're listening to Rihanna, the car will register that as a Rihanna play. Obviously the cars is one car and they're getting averages. So what this little system did was entirely favor major label artists who were getting played all the time, and anybody who got played less below the threshold got paid nothing.
Well, it's still continuing. Obviously, now with YouTube, they're able to actually monitor streams down to the microsecond. But there is YouTube just demonetized or doesn't pay out, I believe, if you're under a certain threshold now.
Right. Which
effectively creates this black box, which is a term they use in the royalties world, where they divide up the streams. Say $100 million came in to pay for these streams. They'll divide it up, and it usually ends up getting distributed amongst the top 95% of artists, or 90%. I'm just using arbitrary numbers for the description. The remaining amount of money that's kind of unallocated goes into what's called a black box that then the major labels or the major publishing companies fight over and get allocated based on their market share for that year. So you end up with a significant amount of money that's not getting to the much smaller artists that are, you know, getting a small thing. So this is one thing where micropayments would make a big difference, where it's not such a hassle to pay someone.
Would be like they all, the big artists and labels, they go to like a fancy dinner, and then there's a doggy bag, and then they fight over who gets the doggy bag. You know?
Are you aware of any? I was trying to look it up. Are you aware of any music publishing or royalty distribution cryptocurrencies or blockchain companies right now that are doing that?
Yeah, there's a couple ones in the music space that are operating. I think Vibrate is one, but I'm not
Vibrate?
like with Viberate.
Oh, Viberate. Yeah, that's I'm gonna make a quick
vibrate.
suggestion to vibrate. Is
Don't just Google that.
Change your
alone.
fucking
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Vibrate. I see what they're saying.
Vibrate. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something like that. And then I know there's a couple other ones that I'd have to look up. But I know people are. I went to a conference last year, and there was someone there that was talking about a project they were working on that is on this whole like royalties and payments and micropayments issue.
Well, I think a way that, forgetting the sort of tracking of plays and all that, a way that blockchain could improve these systems is the ability to pay people immediately and take out some of the middlemen. If you've got a collection agency that's collecting money and then they're paying this and they're paying this much to the label, this much to the publisher, and then this money gets chopped up into a million pieces. By the time the artists get paid, it's nothing. But on an automated system where money, in the case of some of these cryptocurrencies, it doesn't matter how much or how little money it is. It can be transferred anywhere in the world, no fees. It doesn't cost anyone anything. It doesn't have to go through a bank. It doesn't have to have a credit card fee or whatever, or they don't have to collect a certain amount before it becomes worth it to pay out. That would actually speed up and democratize the payment for your work. So say you write a song, it goes on the radio, gets played 3 times, you get paid for 12 cents. Like, why? You should get that 12 cents. You shouldn't have to sit around and write letters and sign up for this and that, to get your money. You should get your 12 cents.
Does it take like months to get paid?
Yeah, it's like they only account
Sometimes a year or more. Yeah.
Sometimes there's an 18-month lag when you're dealing with foreign countries. But if there was basically a direct licensing through like I guess this is where smart contracting would come into it. Like basically what Jesse's saying, that there is no need, because right now if you're a small person, you don't necessarily have to have a big publisher to go do this. You can go through TuneCore, and there are various smaller companies that will collect for you. Nevertheless, it's still another intermediary in that stage.
You don't mean a small person. You mean
I mean small company or like a small viewers
There's no
artist.
discrimination against.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that.
So this brings up an actual thing that we're looking into is the basic attention token, which is a cryptocurrency that I think Danny came across, and it's tied in also with a new browser. So I'll let you describe this a bit better, Dan, because you'll know.
Well, yeah, for anybody out there on the Basic Attention Brave platform, don't message me if I mess up the description of this. But it's the guy who started Firefox and JavaScript, and he made a new browser called Brave. And then he made an associated token called the Basic Attention Token. And the problem he's trying to solve is initially at least, is ad blocking. So Brave, the browser, by default blocks all ads. And the idea is that the user should be paid a portion of that ad money to watch an ad. It should incentivize you to watch an ad, because otherwise, why would you want to do it? So and his ultimate goal, though, is to benefit publishers and advertisers, because they've got a massive problem, which is that they're paying for ads to be distributed and they're not being seen on the internet because people fucking hate ads and they're blocking them. So the basic idea is, rather than making it a dualistic marketplace between publishers and advertisers, to make it a 3-way menage a trois between the content consumer, the content producer, and the advertisers wanting to attach their ad revenue to that.
So the basic way that it's working right now, and this is still very early stages, but you can sign up to be a content provider or a creator, which you can associate right now with your YouTube channel, and I imagine they'll be expanding that across various platforms. The user then has a wallet in their browser where they have a certain amount of these tokens which they can buy on exchanges, or they did an airdrop of free ones for the first 100,000 people that downloaded the browser. And simply by browsing your content on your site, let's just use the example of us. You like KONGOS. You download the Brave browser, you fund your wallet, or it comes pre-funded depending on if you were lucky enough to get a couple of those free tokens. Simply by browsing and watching our videos on YouTube, you're able to allocate a percentage of your monthly budget to the artists or creators that you like, and it goes directly to them. Right. So now that's the two side of it. The ultimate thing will be that advertisers are going to be able to incentivize users to sit through an ad on a specific site. Like if
Right.
we wanted to start running ads for whatever on our site, the end user would be able to share a small portion of the revenue generated by the advertiser paying us to show that ad. So it's I think it's a really great project potentially. It's something we're actually kind of loosely getting involved in and just trying to
let me
get involved in.
Kind of butt in. If any of our fans are listening, well, hopefully we've got fans listening to this. No, for those of our fans that are listening to this, if you want to be a part of some experimental content that we will be providing in the somewhat near future, is download the Brave browser and get familiarized with that technology. And it's very simple. You download Brave browser, look into the basic attention token, because we will be starting to provide some exclusive content for Brave and BAT users. So, and it's still in the early stages, but anyone listening, go check it out. And
just purely for basic understanding, because like some of this stuff is even still over my head. So when you go to a website and you're fucking bombarded with ads and pop-ups and clicks and whatever, it really detracts from the user experience. And if I'm not mistaken, this is trying to make a different system where you can still advertise to people, but if you want to sit through the ad, you get paid basically.
Right. Or you can choose altruistically to donate a portion, whatever you choose, to the publisher because you like their content and you don't want to sit through the ad. So there's so many uses.
So say you go to a website and you think, I'm going to sit through the ads today. You actually get paid, and that goes into your wallet. And then the next day you don't feel like watching ads. You can choose to spend that stuff that the Brave currency that you earned, and not sit through the ads.
Right. No, there's never going to be a situation where you don't get to block ads. You can always block ads. It's that if you can voluntarily contribute some of your tokens to any of the publishers you like, regardless of whether they're advertising or not, just based on attention. So they're trying to, in the same way that you guys are trying to create a token for the price of carbon removal, they're trying to create a token for attention, and what constitutes attention. They've got all these crazy ways that they measure it, like length of time that you're watching something, maybe perhaps even where your mouse is going. It's all anonymous too, and the data gets collected anonymously, and then the token and the price to you or to the advertiser or to the publisher is allocated based on the attention that you've given it.
Is it like that Black Mirror episode, but kind of benevolent? In a way, like you're getting
which one? Which Black Mirror one was it?
Oh, remember that guy? He like loses his credits or whatever. And
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the Black Mirror episodes they're a little bit kind of try to hit the nail on the head, or a little bit too direct with all their storytelling. But unfortunately, like almost every episode of that it seems like it's just going to come true, and it's not actually that far fetched whatsoever.
I can't get into that show.
Oh, really? When it's good, it's great. But there are some that I'm like not as into.
Yeah, I mean, it's just something about the British. What if this happened? What if this technology messed with our morals in it?
I thought that was the first one. I had never heard of it, and like 3 seasons were out, and someone played me the first episode, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Where the guy fucks the pig?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
I saw a great Ask
This is on
Reddit.
Netflix, by the way. This is not on some like dark web .onion.
Reddit had this thing where it was like someone asked Reddit if there was a show called White Mirror that was all about the benevolent effects of technology in the near future. What will we see? And that one was really great because the world in general I think is getting better, and there's lots of stuff to be hopeful for, and I think there's lots of good directions that are going on.
The pessimist would be like, all right, so that's a 2-minute episode. What else you got?
Well, let's do another complete non sequitur, or just like a transition, because I think an hour in, we've probably lost all of our music fans on the blockchain.
Dude, we started so heavy in the beginning too.
But hopefully we've gained some crypto. We'll just keep on calling them crypto nerds, which we are also crypto nerds.
Without the technicals.
Yeah, without the real technical knowledge. Yes. But hopefully we've gained some of those fans. But yeah, so part of the reason also we have you on the podcast is not just because of your crypto knowledge and the company that you're now involved with, but we don't know you that well. You've been friends with Danny, and he's kind of relayed some stories about us. You've had quite an interesting past few years of all odd jobs and traveling around, and you rode your bike like from Phoenix along the highway to LA. Like, explain what's been driving you the past few years to do any and all of these things that that you've been doing.
Wow. I don't know. I always loved that quote of Frank Reynolds in Always Sunny, where he says, "I don't know how many years I got left on this earth. I'm going to get real weird with it." So I don't know. I mean, I hitchhiked from Portland down to LA a few summers ago, and people would pick me up, and they thought I was homeless, and we're like, "Oh, I was homeless once too. I just wanted to help you out." And I'm like wearing a button-up shirt and have like a rolling suitcase, and it was like always people who would help me were like the people that you would least expect it. Like if I saw an Audi or something coming my way, I'm like, that guy's never going to pick me up in a million years. So I don't know. I always like to do weird stuff just because I was a writer for a long time, and I still do a fair amount of writing, but you have to have stories and strange experiences. So a lot of like my writer friends just moved to LA after college, and it's like, you haven't done anything. Like, what are you going to write and tell people about? Like, we don't need another like, oh, I'm a struggling comedian in LA. This is my web series. That's like a very
one of our favorite musicians, Keith Jarrett. He's got a similar approach to that, which is somebody asked him what are his musical influences, and he goes, "It doesn't fucking matter. It's like, music is a language. It's you need experience as an influence." So it's a bit like he truly is an original musician, and the truly original writers were not like trying to emulate the books they read, or they were basing it on life. So yeah, I think that's a valid.
Well, this is a good segment. We have this segment on the show called Member Berries, which is like from that South Park episode where they just go member when. It's a nostalgia kind of episode. Are there any really standout things in your past few years of traveling, which is a good member berry for us? Or why did you ride your bike from Phoenix to LA? And how did you do it?
Bicycle, you mean?
Bicycle, yeah. A motorcycle's not impressive.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I had long wanted to do it, and I've long liked riding bikes, and I had a gap of time where I didn't have to be in LA just yet. So I felt like it would be a fun challenge. The thing I liked about it a lot was that sometimes if you're with other people, you almost complain more because you're like, we can share in it, or I can like unload some of that on you. But if you're by yourself in the desert, you're like, I got to pedal or I will die out here. I need to go right now.
How long did it take you?
The route I took was 11 days and was 700 miles. Jeez. But I didn't just go along the 10.
That would have been. I was going to say that's a horrible bike ride, just the 10.
Oh yeah, it would be brutal. So I went through like Wickenburg and then like Parker, and then my bike didn't have the right gears to go up a mountain, so I wanted to go through Big Bear in that whole way in Angeles Crest. So I had to walk my bike up the mountain twice. So it was like 10 miles of me pushing my bike up a giant mountain.
So did you carry how many supplies did you carry, like for a day or 2 days? Like, what was the length of time that you carried that you didn't have to stop, or did you carry the whole time?
I had a big bladder on my bag that held like 5 gallons, I think, something like that. And then I had the panniers that hang off the back, like little saddle bags, but mostly just like a sleeping bag. And I don't even think I had a tent or anything, or maybe I had like a bivvy sack. But have you ever slept in one of those? It's like a tent, but it's like for survival. So it's like you have no room to move at all.
Yeah.
I quickly gave up on that.
Have you seen that documentary series called The Long Way Round with Ewan McGregor?
Oh yeah, the motorcycle trip. Yeah.
So if anyone that hasn't seen that, you should check it out. It's a really great series. But they bump into, on their travel around the world, they bump into this guy, and I forget the guy's name, who traveled around the world, circumnavigated the globe on human power alone. Meaning he walked, cycled, rode, or pedal boated. So he pedal boated from Portugal to New York. Like, I mean,
that's way more extreme than me.
No, yeah, it's way more extreme than anyone ever.
Yeah,
in the
Ross,
history of the world.
you just made him feel like, oh, cool.
That was an achievement before I talked to you.
Cool
Hey, listen,
story.
I rode my bike once up to like the Circle K and got a water. That's the limit of my bicycling experience. I'm just saying it kind of triggered me to remember that documentary series and just think about the crazy things people have done. And I didn't even know if he was a writer.
Does anything else stand out, like in the last few years that you've been?
I have to remember something. No, I mean, I guess I could finish part of that hitchhiking story, or just the people who would pick me up, this was like a great lesson too, was they oftentimes didn't like have anything. Like oftentimes the people who were kindest to me on that hitchhiking journey were people who had either been homeless themselves or were going through, some of the stories they would tell you were just heartbreaking. Like these people picked me up and they said that they had moved out west from like Ohio because they lost a job or something, and then they got there and they were staying with his mom in a trailer park, and by the time they got there they didn't realize that she had become hooked on meth, and sort of like they were getting evicted, so they were like, and then they were like trying to give me food and stuff in the car and they had nothing. I was just like, you're way too generous. And I was always struck by that. Like these people have nothing, but we're always very happy to give.
That's a really interesting, that gives me an actual member, Barry. We were traveling in Greece, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And our van broke down on the sand because we were idiots, and we drove onto the beach and, you know, didn't realize we weren't gonna be able to get out of there. And anyway, got stuck there, like proper stuck, for a good hour or so. And eventually these farmers came up, brought a tractor over, pulled us out, spent 3 hours of their day helping these idiots get out of the beach. And at the end, I think we went to go try and buy them some wine, like just as a gesture. And they weren't insulted, but they were almost like, why would you, like, we're just helping you. That's what we do, is we help people if they need help. It was just such a, and it wasn't a fake generosity or fake humility or whatever. It was a truly different experience meeting these people because they were so generous. Because I think generosity, the best judge for me of generosity is time. Because that, for me, feels like the most precious commodity. Is like, it's easy if you have some money to give someone $20 or put it in a homeless person, give someone $20. But to dedicate your time, that for me has always been a hard thing to do. So when someone does that, it always stands out, you know?
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful thing, and
it makes you feel like an asshole.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Well, on to the next segment, which is actually related, is we talk about like favorite gear of the week. So we usually talk about stuff from the studio, but do you have anything while hitchhiking or riding your bike or traveling? Like what's a favorite piece of gear that you have to have while you're out on the adventure?
I don't know. Probably a knife. You always keep, I don't want to like end up being a lampshade or something. Like, you know, like keep. But then again,
who did that again? Which one was that?
That was Dahmer, or
I don't know, Gein.
Yeah, it was one of that. If anyone doesn't know the reference, it was to like a serial killer. He literally made lampshades out of people.
It's like the Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah. That's who they based that guy on.
It's
one of them.
One of them, yeah.
But it sounds so unreal that you laugh at it. Like it creates you know, I don't want to laugh at like somebody suffering or whatever, but that literally is my reaction because it's an involuntary reaction. Like it just sounds like such
so crazy,
so bizarre. You can't wrap your head around how.
But also, why a lampshade? Like, oh. Never mind.
That's not even like we're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Like you would prefer a nice suitcase or something, or you're sick. You've got a problem. That was always the thing. I actually got a new MacBook the other day. Actually, just arrived this morning. The thing is so small and so powerful too. It's like I have like a big MacBook Pro for video editing and occasionally gaming because I'm that kind of guy, which is just like a behemoth to carry around. But I can't believe they're making it so thin. It weighs like a pound or pound and a half, 2 pounds. That's I'm pretty happy with that right now. That's the
knife and a MacBook. Yeah.
Have you heard of Go Tennas?
No, what's that?
They're these little radio devices. Basically, they relay radio signals that it interacts or it works with an app on your phone through Bluetooth. Mo, if you're listening, it's Bluetooth. And so if cell signals or cell towers go out, you can use this device and you can, like, or at a music festival, if there's no cell signal, the more people on the network, the better, because it can bounce signals off each GoTenna device. And it works up to 10 miles with just through from individuals from one to another.
Wow. So you can text message basically.
Yeah, so you can text message, you can use maps, you can...
Uses the is it the CV band or FM band?
I think it's FM,
So
but
part of the FM spectrum, because that's always operating, and it generates its own sender and receiver. You're not going through a tower.
It's like it's a walkie-talkie that's translating walkie-talkie data into a text message.
But
You guys are like full preppers, huh?
Well,
getting ready
yeah,
for it.
we did get a whole bunch of them after that. The weird Hawaii emergency text that went out. We were all just like, "What the fuck just happened?" And like, what would you can't even fathom what you would do in that situation if it was real. But we all just thought, well, this might be good, even if like a cell tower goes out, or if you're at a music festival. It's perfect for a music festival if you're snowboarding. We're not sponsored by GoTen or anything like that, right?
But the kind of really cool thing that separates it from just being a walkie-talkie and even being able to send text over the FM radio is the mesh aspect. So you can it's a distributed network of these devices, and you can actually look on their website and see people leave them on as a node. And you can see, like, LA is covered in them. So now the range of FM is limited, particularly in a city, because you're going to be hitting buildings. But because there's so many of them here, you could communicate over great distances. So I think it's a really cool tool that I hopefully never have to use.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately was going to like Walking Dead imagery when you go on the app and you see like the Shout network. Again, it was empty because nobody was shouting at each other. But you can shout to anybody with a
as like an emergency,
like a broadcast,
like a chat room, from the 90s, but all via FM frequencies.
Like the ASL, whatever.
What was that?
The age, sex, location. Did you ever use AOL Instant Messenger?
No.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Is it like? Do you remember that?
No, I don't.
No, I never used that. We never did. We have? I remember one of the earliest.
IRC channels, or what are they called?
Something like that.
Global chat or something.
Yeah.
Or some,
I do remember rushing home from school to like get on AOL and chat with friends. It was like, I just spent all day with you. Why am I doing this? And now, and that was so strange at the time.
I think it was the novelty of
And now you got your cell phone. You do it anyway all day. But
we were going to talk about that microphone thingy.
Oh yeah.
What was that? What's that called?
MV88.
Because we are totally open about our endorsement with Shure. They are an amazing company, and they have really helped us out a lot with our audio gear, microphones. The microphones we're talking on right now are courtesy of this company, Shure. And they gave us some of these new things that are freaking awesome.
It's a Shure MV88.
Okay, so it's a microphone basically that plugs into your phone, your iPhone or whatever, Android. And it's, number one, has an amazing sound, but it also comes with an app so that you can control it. So you can control whether it picks up stereo signal or mono signal. And Mick, our front of house engineer, actually would just plug this into his phone. And like the last tours that we went on, the South America tour, the May tour that we went on, he just put it at front of house and recorded every single show. And that audio is becoming so useful to us in this documentary series. So where if we want to show some show footage, we can just go and grab that audio and it sounds decent. It sounds like you were in the room hearing the band, as opposed to like a normal camera sound, which is like would be
we should post that acoustic performance.
Yeah, we'll put a link up. We did a performance in Chicago for Shure, and they filmed the whole thing and recorded it on one of these things. So what you hear on that video is just that microphone. There's nothing else, no other microphones on that, and it's pretty amazing. So we all got a couple of those, and we carry them around just for recording ideas. And like Jesse said, yeah.
All right. I feel like
what's it like to be in a this is our new thing. We have a segment called What's It Like to Be in a Band with Your Brothers, because we get that question a billion times in every interview. Have you got, you don't have to have an answer for this. Have you got a new take on that question, or a new way, or a new curiosity about brothers bands that we've not heard before? You can say no if you don't.
I don't know if I have a lot of thought a lot about brothers.
We're asking our guest to interview us.
Well, no, we're just asking anyone to come up with a new angle on that.
No, I don't. I mean, this segment I think should be removed. That's my view.
No, I think you should just bring it up every time and just move on. And that's it. We get some guests who if somebody asks us a new question or has a new angle on it, that will be truly amazing and it'll make the segment worth it. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next segment.
All right. Yeah. Well, until that time.
What's deep thoughts for this week?
Someone put it down or scribbled it down called is Bob Marley ahead or behind the beat?
Oh yeah, that was me.
Okay, yeah, this is good. This is a good topic.
Yeah, so we'll put a link to this video. It's if we can find it actually, because it's a hard one to find. But it's Bob Marley playing Natural Mystic in Dortmund, Germany, a live performance of it. And you know, when you listen to Bob Marley, particularly, I think he sounds so perfectly in the pocket that there's very few people that sound like that. So then it, I guess, opens up the question of what does in the pocket mean? Because for some people, in the pocket might feel ahead of the beat or behind the beat.
Well, let's define in the pocket for non-musicians. In the pocket is a way of saying that they are locked into the tempo to where it feels right and it feels like the divisions of time are correct. It's correct for the music. Like, if you ever seen a really bad, like say there's a great band and the drummer sucks and he feels like he's playing faster or slower than everybody, you would say that guy's out of the pocket. So it's one of the things musicians love to talk about, because the subtleties of that timing is everyone has a sort of their own take on it, you know, and some people have preferences. They like to feel like they're ahead of the rest of the band, or some people like to feel like they're behind the rest of the band. And those relationships that grow between band members, very often rhythm section, like bass player and drummer, you know, those are special relationships that are defined. So, what do you ask? Like, what is the...
I had a thought about it, because you can even be in the pocket with yourself. Like what you're saying obviously is correct, because there's a constant battle or agreement among band members and where they line up. But even within yourself, if you're trying to play a simple drum beat or any kind of rhythm within yourself, you can be on top of it in relation to yourself. And I just had this thought that it's when you look at Bob Marley, and maybe this is just like projecting ideas about weed and like kind of high thoughts about this, but you almost get this sense that the reason they're so in the pocket is because they don't even acknowledge that there is going to be a next beat. Like they just exist in that beat. And it's obviously it's a little bit of like hippie, airy-fairy bullshit talk, but you know, sometimes I've felt that sort of thing, that if I am constantly thinking about the music or thinking, you know, well, I'm on beat 1, beat 2's coming up at some point, am I going to be ahead of it, am I going to be behind it, I'm missing the point. If I just experience each beat in its moment,
right,
which it's a bit of a paradox even saying each beat, like that implies there is another beat, but I'm saying like in a quite a deep internal way that you disallow the possibility that there's anything beyond the beat that you're in.
Right. So I mean, I think I always like listening to certain Ray Charles records for this, because the guitar player will be playing straight and the drummer will be swinging or whatever, and then the bass player will be behind or somebody will be ahead, right? So in literal terms, the divisions of the grid that they're complying with are different for each of the players, but they're all complying with what you guys call the pocket, right? So that is something outside of the literal division of time and the mechanical division of time. There is this pocket that they're sharing. They're sharing this moment, basically. There's a shared moment. And
well, to try and visualize it, if you've ever looked at a heart monitor or something, you know, this blip that goes up, and it's on like a line. So there's these divisions of time that are represented by this thing that goes blip, 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 and you know, if you have a perfectly solid heartbeat, those spaces, gaps will be even. So if that's your tempo, call it.
It actually means you're very stressed, I think.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
Forgetting the health discussion. So imagine this blip, 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 right? The metronome, and say the drummer wants to be ahead of that. So he's going to hit his beat slightly before, and imagine it like in front of the bleep on the graph. And the bass player, he wants to be behind, so he's going to be slightly behind. And the subtleties of that gap is actually creates a certain sound to the music where it corresponds to our bodies, I think. And when that gap is just right, or they're locking up just right, it makes our bodies want to move, or it creates the necessary emotional response in us. And that's the sort of the musical aspect that, you know, takes this technical talk and it turns into something real. It's like, this makes me feel good, or it makes me want to fucking get up and dance, even though I never will.
I think maybe we can like broaden the discussion a little bit here, because are you a musician or?
Yeah, I used to play in bands in high school and college.
Okay, so you're not completely not with us in the discussion.
I'm following what you guys are after. Yeah.
I feel like it's can be described only in like an internal state of awareness or being or whatever while you're playing, that you have to, like Joey says, remove your thinking apparatus from it, and it has to be felt. And I think you could probably attribute that to the cheesy phrase of being in the moment. But your body feels something intuitively, and you allow that to be uninterrupted or unencumbered by thought about and identifying with the past beat or the future beat or a mistake that you made or whatever else. You're truly trying to be in tune with your body to feel and sense where everyone else in the band is at. But I think other people who aren't musicians might be able to relate to it in terms of like flow state, which is now like a real popular term in neuroscience and all that, when you get into the flow of writing. And I wonder, like, if you have any experience with that, like what distinguishes between that feeling and not that feeling. If you're playing music, if you're writing, you said you're a writer and you've written a lot. What is the difference for you, like, between those two feelings?
Well, I used to have this with music too. I was always kind of like a band leader. I'd play rhythm guitar and sing and write the songs and lead us through them. And I remember playing and just like closing my eyes, and this is as hippie as what you said, but just like feeling like a beam of light, and just like it was so pure. I didn't even have to think about it. It was just like everyone was playing together so perfectly, and it was definitely in the pocket. And that feeling is beautiful. Writing can't come close to that. Writing is like deep practice. I don't know if you guys know that term, but it's like if you're doing a math problem, you can feel your brain like working out and feel that energy, and you kind of want to quit. Like that's what writing is like, where you're just like, this is writing music is oftentimes like this too. But I've never had that sort of like same flow state where music is very pure and accessible. It doesn't necessarily have that like cerebral, like, haha, that was really clever, I'm glad I did that act structure device.
Well, so maybe it's that. Or the deepest feeling of it is when you're with other people, when you're playing with other people, because there's some connection there.
Oh, sure. I've even had that by myself, but yeah, when you're with a group of people jamming and it works, it's
Aldous Huxley?
Be the ball,
Yeah, was it Aldous Huxley that said all art aspires to the condition of music?
No.
Who said that?
I think his name was Thomas something, but it wasn't Aldous Huxley. Huxley. I will temper what you said, Dylan, about removing the cerebral part, because I don't think that removal of the cerebral part is actually the necessary goal. I think in a perfect scenario, your entire being is playing the music. Your body is carrying out the actions on the instrument, whether it's drums or guitar or singing or whatever. Your physical body is carrying out these instructions in the correct way. Your emotional state is connected to the music that you're performing, and then your brain is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's thinking about perhaps there is a conceptual meaning behind the lyrics, or perhaps you do have to think about the next bar. You just want that process to go on and not interfere at all, or not remove the dominance from the feeling or the body or whatever.
I can't remember what I just said, but I didn't mean to remove your remove any thinking of it. A better word is identifying with that thought process, whether it's in the past or
where your
future,
attention might unnecessarily,
because then your attention is being drawn away from what it can actually be used, because you still need your brain to function in what scale you're going to be soloing, or what time signature and all that, but just not identifying with the future or the past.
There is a state though where trying to describe it becomes difficult, because clearly your brain is operating and all the functions of your body are operating, but the only way to describe it is it feels something else. Like you have to use words like Ross was saying, like white light, and like it sounds silly, but sometimes you have those moments. I think they're very, very, very rare, and then often you can hear them in the great recordings that you're able to watch. Like the one that comes to mind for me is Keith Jarrett, Eyes of the Heart, where it just seems like he's obviously put in 50 years worth of intellectual work of studying the rules and the learning how to play his instrument, and then occasionally everything aligns perfectly and he just simply follows the flow of where that music should have gone.
Channels a bit of magic.
Yeah, it's like you have to get into sort of using magical words.
Well, I think
at some point.
that's funny that we like every time we preface some experience like this, being in that state, we always preface it with it's very hippie, and we kind of downplay it, and we're like almost embarrassed to talk about these things that are inexpressible or unexpressible.
They ruined it,
Inexplicable.
man.
Yeah,
They ruined it for the musicians.
you know who the fucking ruined it is the hippies. They, it's not like the neocons or like the really right wing. They kind of ruined freedom of expression and flower power. It's the fucking hippies who ruined that shit because they do it so like
flippantly.
I'm saying they like they're all the same, but it is it's disingenuous.
It's the bandwagon hippies, the ones who like, oh, this is cool. I'm gonna be a hippie.
Right. So now you don't want to associate with this kind of disingenuous hippiness, but
I'll just
I mean, we're not removed from that though. I don't think. I think that there is a genuine. I'm sure everybody on Earth has had experiences that they would categorize as special, whatever brought them into that experience. And then we're doing the same thing that people who wear a flower sheath, or what is that called? What are those called? A flower crown of yeah. We're just by talking about it, we're fashionizing the experience to a degree, because the experience is only what the experience is. You can't.
Yeah, but we have to intellectualize it to a certain extent, because in order to observe a recording like this Bob Marley thing, you can look at that and just say, yeah, that's magic. But if that's the extent of what your commentary is on it, then you might not necessarily find the means within yourself to try and pursue that. So you have to ask yourself these questions. What is it actually that he's doing? Why does this sound so magical? Because there is probably, or definitely partially, a rational explanation for it. It's because the groove is this much behind and it's got this feel to it. But then also the question has to be asked beyond the mathematical explanation of why that works.
I'll end it, I think, with a reminder of that Memberberry where we saw the Wailers in Sioux City, and the rhythm guitar player is this old guy. I'm guessing he was in his 60s, and his part for most of the songs was literally playing a backbeat, which is that part in the reggae music, which is the chords that sound like that, and it's technically unbelievably simple, but to execute it as well as he was, you have to dedicate your entire attention or your entire feel to that one little part of the music that you're taking care of. And I saw him doing that, watching from side stage. He would play that part for the entire song, and he seemed to me, from an observer's standpoint, that he was perfectly happy to do that part without any feeling of like, oh, I should be doing something cooler or more complicated, or I should have a solo or whatever. Like, he was happy to play that role. And it's only through that sort of dedication that you can get that music where somebody's willing to perform that role perfectly for 90 minutes. And that's where we get the magic from, is because somebody's is kind of dedicating themselves to that. And that was kind of like a little moment for me, is our little egos always want to be like, oh, I should be playing the solo, or maybe I should really be focused on doing a fancy drum fill or something like that. And if you can resist that impulse and just dedicate to what the song deserves, for me, that's like a little special moment that once in a while you can have.
Yeah, trying hard doesn't really look good on anyone. Like, I feel like if you're just do it like really competently, but you're not like reaching beyond what you need to be doing, sometimes there's something that's noble in just doing that like really well.
I just watched Eyes Wide Shut, and Tom Cruise has got that trying hard. The movie's really good, I think, and he's really good in it. He's really good in Magnolia and stuff like that. But he's always got that trying hard thing, and it's Yes, it's off-putting.
Just so into the conspiracies, man.
I am.
Eyes wide shut.
I've only seen Doctor Strangelove, and I kept seeing stuff about Kubrick.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
like,
he's
fuck,
great.
I gotta go catch up on Kubrick stuff. So.
All right, before we go into Eyes Wide Shut, let's end it there. Unless anyone else got anything cool to say?
Thank you, Ross, for coming. I've personally really enjoyed all the technical stuff that we got into. I hope some of our audience did too. But I'll just put a little cap on it and say that, guys, the fucking blockchain is coming. It's coming for us. So we might as well learn a little bit about it. You know, like, I'm interested.
And they can go to Nori, right? .com?
Nori.com.
And
Nori.
You guys have, if you really want to get into the technical side, Ross, they have a podcast, and they've got professors from universities talking about all of these issues, and you can really delve in deeply.
Yeah, make sure to check our website. We'll put links to all of Ross's stuff up there.
Just as a matter of curiosity, do you guys have a timeline on when your kind of token launch might happen?
We're looking at the summer or fall.
Of this year?
Of this year.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
so we're already quite busy talking to people, trying to make sure that all sides of the market have people ready to go. But yeah, if you want to hear about it, it's Reversing Climate Change is on your podcast apps. And thanks for having me. This is super fun. It was nice to hang out with all of
and you have your own, Nori has its own podcast.
That's right, yeah.
Right. Okay, so that's
what that is, Reversing Climate Change.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you can find that on their website at nori.com/podcast. Cool. All right, yeah, thanks for coming by.
Cool.
Subscribe and tell your friends about it. Like we always say, you can send a link or a tweet or a WhatsApp, but just fucking talk to somebody in real life and tell them about this podcast. That's how it's going to grow.
Yeah,
so
we're
thanks,
putting all
guys.
this effort into content marketing, guys. Like, you gotta react to it.
All right. See you next week.